Vav Amud Beis, and we're up to Rav Masna Omar. Rav Masna Omar is 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. Basically, the Gemara was trying to figure out what the reason for having 3 walls or 4 walls are, because we have machlokes according to Reb Shimon or the rabbis about 3 walls or 4 walls, and the Gemara explained 4 explanations based on the pasuk that it says the psukim that it says sukkos a number of times, and most of them don't have a vav, don't have the plural. One of them does have the plural. So we talked about Yeshem Lamasaidas, Yeshem Lamikra. We follow the way it's written or follow the way it's read. We had 4 ways of explaining the debate, the argument between Reb Shimon and the rabbis. And now comes Rav Masna. Rav Masna says that it seems like a whole different reason that he brings us up the pasuk in Yeshaya that we've seen before. And he says, Rav Masna Amar Taima de Reb Shimon. The reason of Reb Shimon holds you need 4 walls for a sukkah, and the 4th wall could be a tefach, but it has to be 4. It has to be the 4th wall. We don't hold that way. We hold the 3rd wall could be a tefach, and all you need is 3 walls, and even the 3rd wall is not a real full size wall. But Reb Shimon held that you need 4 walls. 4th wall could be a tefach, a partial wall, or it's going to be fit. It's going to fulfill the necessity of having 4 walls. Now, what's the reason? So he learns it mehacha. The reason of Reb Shimon is mehacha from here. Let me mute everyone over here. So he says the reason is from here, from this pasuk in Yeshaya of a sukkah tiyal etzel yoimam mechayrev. The sukkah should be for tzel, for shade during the day from the heat. Ulamachsel lamister, a type of protection and refuge. Mizerem umimatar, from like storms and rain. And the way he understands the pasuk is that he's either learning from the word that there's 4 words, mechse, mister, zerem, and mutter, that you need 4 walls, or he's learning from the fact that it's supposed to protect you from the rain and from the zerem, like the storm, the wind, and because it has to protect you from the zerem, this is the way Rashi learns. It needs to protect you from the zerem, which is this type of stormy winds. So in order to protect you from that, you would need 4 walls. So basically, the way Rav Masna understands it is that there's a pasuk in Yeshaya that teaches us what a sukkah consists of. A sukkah consists of a 4-walled structure that protects someone from zerem, from this type of stormy winds. Now, once we know what a sukkah is supposed to be, then we understand when the Torah says sukkah is referring to that sukkah. When the halacha l'maisha Sinai comes around and says, well, you don't need a full sukkah, you don't need a full wall. The final wall could be just the tefach. So it comes out that the sukkah is not for 4 full walls, but that's based on the halacha l'maisha Sinai. The actual meaning of sukkah is that it has 4 walls. Comes the halacha l'maisha Sinai. Hashem comes and tells Moshe, even though a sukkah needs 4 walls, and that's the meaning of sukkah. But for sukkahs, all you need is 3 walls and a tefach, according to Reb Shimon. That's the way Reb Shimon learns. It's interesting because Tosfos over here says that the Yerushalmi explains that both of them seem to learn from this pasuk. In other words, Reb Shimon and the rabbis. The rabbis also learn that you need 3 walls from the pasuk. And the difference between Reb Shimon and the rabbis is Reb Shimon learns that there's 4 words over here. So the it says the sukkah should be for tselia mechayrev. That's the roof. Lamechsa lamister mizera mamimatar is 4 walls. And the rabbis say zerem and mutter is 1, is the same, is all equal, is 1 wall, zerem and mutter. And so mechsa mister is 2, and zerem mutter is the 3rd wall. And then comes the halacha Moshe Messina and says even the 3rd wall doesn't have to be a full wall; it could be even a tefach. So in other words, the argument between the way Tosfos understands it, based on Yerushalmi, is that Reb Masna is explaining both opinions. That in Reb Shimon's opinion is that zerem and mutter are 2 separate things, and therefore he learns you need 4 walls, and the 4th wall could be a tefach. That's halacha Moshe Messina. The rabbis would learn zerem mutter is the same thing. So then you have 3 walls, and then comes the halacha Moshe Messina and teaches us that that third wall could even be just a tefach, a handbreadth, and doesn't need to be a full wall. So that's basically this 5th understanding of Reb Shimon. Again, the Gemara yesterday, we saw the four explanations based on Yishem, Lamikra, Yishem, Lamikra. Here comes the 5th reason, and that is, and that's how that's from this pasuk. There isn't a commentary that says that the way Reb Shimon understands this pasuk from Yeshaya is really explaining how to learn the psukim of basukais, that it says it singular, and then only one of them is plural. So from here, you see in Yeshaya that a sukkah has 4 walls. So now we know how to learn the psukim about sukkah, that it should teach us 4 walls. In other words, basically the commentaries are what they're dealing with is an issue that I've mentioned many times, that normally you don't learn something from the Navi as a halacha of the Torah. In other words, the Torah's halachas are supposed to be learned in the Torah. In the Nevi'im, you don't bring a halacha from the Nevi'im it's a divrei Torah mi divrei Kabbalah lo yalfinon. That means that you can't learn a halacha divrei Torah from divrei Kabbalah, from the words of the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im, there's great inspiration and messages and so on, but the halachas you don't learn from the Nevi'im. The halachas have to be hinted to somewhere in the Torah. So whenever the Gemara brings a source in Navi, so often what the commentaries try to do is figure out how to reconcile that with the other statement that you're not supposed to learn a halacha from the Nevi'im. So one of the ways of doing that, one of the common ways of answering such a question is that we say that the Nevi'im aren't telling us a halacha. They're just Gilui Milsa Bialma. They're just revealing the matter. What does that mean? Like in our example, one of the ways of explaining our Gemara is that he's not learning it from Yeshaya, not learning a halacha from Yeshaya, you need 4 walls. He's learning from Yeshaya what a sukkah means. It's a Gilui Milta B'Yam. It's telling you what the word sukkah means. Now go in the Torah, it says sukkah. Oh, now I know what sukkah is. In the Yeshaya, it says the meaning of the word. In the Chumash, it tells you what you have to do. You have to dwell in a sukkah. Okay, so the meaning of the word is in Yeshaya. The halacha part is in the Chumash. That's one way of answering it. Another way of explaining it is that the sukkah is it's telling me, how many walls you need, or it's telling me because sukkah means 4 walls. Now go learn the Chumash and go learn how it says sukkah, and you'll come up with the correct way of learning it, because based on Yeshaya, it's we see that a sukkah should have four walls. So in other words, so that's that would be another way. Another alternative of how to learn this is that Yeshaya is just giving he's giving a confirmation to what it says in the Torah, meaning that the Reb Shimon is learning you need 4 walls from the Torah, and the pasuk in Yeshaya is sort of like a hint to the final conclusion of what the pasuk is telling you, how he's learning the Chumash. So this hints to this pasuk in Yeshaya is a good way of remembering it, or it's more of a we're just using it as an asmachta, so to speak, a good sort of like not a source, but a hint to it. That you see in Yeshaya such a hint, it's not the source of it. That would be another way. Again, we're trying to answer the question of how do you learn something from Divrei Kabbalah, from the words of the prophet. So all the commentaries deal with this, and they say some of the explanations that I shared, all of the explanations that I shared with you are based on different commentaries. Okay, back to the Gemara. So now we have the 3 walls in the Tefach. Yes, Victor.
So a lot of times the Gemara quotes like from Tehillim also, right? So
same thing. It would be the same thing. Like
I wanted to just understand if it's the same thing. In other words, is that what they're saying? Okay.
It would be the same thing, that you wouldn't learn a halacha from the from the Tehillim. So the commentaries would probably deal with it there. If there's whenever it does that, it brings a source into Tehillim, it would have to bring commentaries would have to deal with it. How are you learning Divrei Torah from Divrei Kabbalah?
Right. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So the Gemara continues and talks about the law of the 3 walls. That the third wall, we hold the third wall to be a tefach. That was the rabbi's view. But tefach heichon ma'amidoi. That third tefach, that third wall, that's a tefach, that's a handbreadth. Where do you place it? Amar Rav ma'amidoi keneged hayotzi. Rav says you put it at the end of one of the walls that are there already. So you have an L-shaped wall. You have an L shape, meaning you have 2 walls perpendicular to each other. Put the third wall, which is only a tefach, next to the end of one of those walls. And that would be the third wall, and that would be a kosher sukkah. That's the way Rav holds. Amri lei, Rav Kahana Rabasi Rav. Rav Kahana and Ravasi said to Rav, "V'yamidenu keneged reish Tur. Shouldn't you place it? You should stand it on a diagonal." And the meaning of that diagonal is, of course, topic of a lot of discussion in the commentaries, but I'm just trying to see if the regular Gemara, do all of you have like a little picture over there in your Gemara? Because I have a more modern Gemara here, so I don't know what you people have, if you have that picture. But it's basically an L shape with a diagonal, almost like you're trying to make a triangle, but it's only a tefach. Is that called the hypotenuse? That long line that connects, that would be like the triangle that would make the third line of a triangle, is only a tefach long. So it's like an L shape with a partial hypotenuse. So that is the simple meaning over here, and the reason why these rabbis think that maybe that's where the tefach should be. Again, instead of putting the tefach as if it was a third wall, making a box, you're putting it like making a triangle. That's basically where you're putting the tefach. Now, if that's so, the reason why they think that would be better is because at least it looks like it's 4 walls. In other words, it's enclosing it more. If you put the tefach the other way, where it's making like a box, it doesn't really look like a complete enclosure. This makes it look more like an enclosure. In fact, the words of Rashi is it makes it look like it's 4 walls. That's the way Rashi words it. Interestingly enough, just looking, I have a little note over here.
It's hard to understand. One thing is, like, if it's only a tefach anyway, the amount that it's going to angle, and the amount it's infinitesimal. You don't see much. There's no difference really. How much protection are you going to get? You're not going to get any much difference either way.
So what it seems like is that the way these rabbis are understanding it is that this would be either more ideal, or this is actually the way it should be, because it seems more of a structure. Meaning, we know halacha l'maisha Sinai is that it's kosher with the third wall of tefach, but the halacha l'maisha Sinai didn't clarify how to do it. So these rabbis understood that we have to do it the most kosher way possible. At least if we're doing, halacha l'maisha is telling you can get away with the tefach, but it should be the most similar to a real sukkah. And so by doing it that way, they feel like this is probably more the appropriate way to understand the halacha l'maisha Sinai. This is the most appropriate way, meaning you can't be so lenient to just say, oh, any direction. This is more enclosed. But you're right, it's very minimal. But we know halacha l'maisha Sinai is that it's kosher. The only thing is, these rabbis held, let's do it the most kosher way possible, because that would be a good understanding of the halacha l'maisha Sinai. And Rav, the Gemara says, Shasik Rav. Rav is quiet. And commentaries debate what this means. Why was he quiet? The common understanding based on the Balamar is that Rav is quiet because he did not agree with them. This is, the halacha l'maisha Sinai is a tefach. That's the normal way of making it, is three, the third wall is straight, not diagonal. It says it's a tefach, it's kosher, kosher that way. There is one of the commentaries wants to say that Rav didn't really argue on these other rabbis. Yeah, that might be nicer to do, might be a better way, but this is the halacha, is that it could be this way. No, so Rav was saying the halacha. Oh, you're saying we should do it that way? Okay, but this is kosher. In other words, Rav is speaking halacha. They're speaking in Me'ash Arim world. This is, you want to do it the best possible way. That's you want to do it that way and be more machmer. That's okay. But keep in mind, this is, Rav was quiet because I said the halacha. I'm not changing my words. I'm not saying you're wrong. That's kosher. But this is the way it's. This is the kosher way to do it. So anyway, different ways of understanding why Rav was quiet, but the Gemara doesn't explain itself. Itmar Nami, it was also said this way in the Beis Medrash, similar to what Rav said. Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi. Shmuel said the name of Levi. Where do you put that third wall, that tefach wall, that handbreadth wall? Ma'amidoi kineged hayotzei. You put it by the end of one of those L shape of one of those walls. That's part of the L. V'chein moirin bei medrasha, and so do they paskin in the Beis Medrash. That's the common halacha l'maisa. This is what they paskin. That's how they are moira. That's how they give hayrois. They teach. They give the psak. Is that's where you put it? Ma'amidoi kineged hayotzei, like Rav said, you put it opposite by the one of those end walls where the wall ends, where the L ends. That's where you place it. And so that's the Gemara. We have Rav, we have Shmuel in the name of Levi, and that's the way they paskin in the Beis Medrash. That's the first view over here. Now comes Rebbe Simon. Rabbi Simon, V'yitema Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Amar. Rabbi Simon, and some say Rabbi Shua ben Levi, says, number one, you got to make the tefach to be a laughing tefach, soichek. And the meaning of the tefach soichek is that it's a little looser. A tefach means a handbreadth. Now, when your handbreadth, you could be tight, a tight handbreadth, or you could be a little more loose, and the size of the handbreadth expands a little. So there's a tefach called a tefach otzev, a depressed tefach. Otzev is from the word atzvus, like depressed. If someone is depressed, so the tefach could be squashed together, squeezed together, very tight tefach. That's a smaller tefach. And then you could have a tefach that's soichik, that's sort of like laughing. It's bigger, it's more expanded. So Rabbi Sivan and some say Rabbi Levi say that number one, the tefach is soichik. It's a little bigger than a tefach, the regular tefach, and the point is that your fingers are not touching each other. So how much bigger is it? Very minimal, just that they're not squeezed against each other. They're just not touching each other. It's a little bigger than a tefach. Now, the tefach umashu, that would be the term, tefach and a bit. Now, where do you put that tefach? And that's what we were talking about before. Where you're putting it? You put it within 3 handbreadths near the wall of the L. So, in other words, you're going to have an L shape, 2 walls. Then you have 2 3/4 empty space. And then you put the tefach that's a little bigger than a tefach right next to it. And ultimately, how big is your wall? Your wall is now, if we count the law of Lavad and your tefach soichik and this handbreadth that is a board, a solid board for a tefach, a little over a tefach. So plus your empty space that falls within the rule of Lavad, that it attaches the 2 walls together. So now we have a wall of 4 handbreadths, because the handbreadth, that's a physical handbreadth, and then the 3 that are non-physical handbreadths, but it's called Lavad, it's considered as if it's physical handbreadth. So we've got all together 1 plus 3 equals 4. Now I said 1 plus 3 equals 4. I really should say 1.1 plus 2.9 equals 4. That's really to be more exact, because if it's 3 handbreadths space, empty space, it would already be puzzle invalid. So I really should say, to be more precise, 2.9 plus a tefach, which is soichek, so we'll call it a 1.1 tefach, and a 2.9 tefachs of empty space. Altogether, you got 4 tefachim, 4 handbreadths of a wall, and that would be the majority of a sukkah wall, which needs to be 7. So you've got 4 handbreadths of a wall that would make it work. Now, you could ask that, why do you need 4 to make it a majority? Even 3 and 3.6 is already majority of 7, right? So we talked a little about this, that because the size of 4 tefachs is considered a shear, a measurement of a location it has a certain measurement rules to it. So we want this wall to fall within that category of 4 tefachim. One of the explanations that the commentaries give is it should be recognizable to the eye that you have majority, and because of that, it's you need to pull it off. You need to have that measurement. But the other explanation is the one I gave, and that it has to be a sheer chashuv, a significant size, and that would be 4 tefachim, which we've seen that there is such a measurement of 4 tefachim that makes it something significant, a sheer chashuv. Anyway, bottom line is that so do we have an argument here how to make the 3rd wall of a sukkah. I'm not sure how many people rely on this 3rd wall type of a sukkah, but it is acceptable. It's, this is the halacha, that the 3rd wall could be even a tefach, and you have to know how to put it, where to place it. But this would be the halacha, this final opinion. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that the previous Gemara that talked about this L-shaped sukkah, and you can have a 3rd wall that's only a tefach, that works when they're perpendicular. The 2 walls are L-shaped. Sukkah is a mavoi, but if you have a sukkah that's made like a mavoi, which is a alley meaning they're parallel to each other. You have two walls that are parallel to each other, but you don't have any third wall. And now you want to make a tefach for a third wall. So this is what he says: sukkah that's made like a mavui, kashera, it is kosher. But as long as you make a third tefach, you place it in any place where you want. You have 4 options next to any of the ends of the walls. So this is Rav Yehuda about a parallel sukkah, 2 parallel walls. You could put the third wall, a tefach, next to any of the ends of the other of those 2 walls. So each wall you have 2 ends, so it's 4 options where to put the third tefach to make the third wall. Rabbi Simon and Rabbi Simon v'Tema Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar, and Simon some say Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say isolate pass arba'a. You have to make a wall, a board that's 4 handbreadths umashahu, and it is a little over 4 handbreadths. Let's say 4.1 handbreadths. Umamidai bepachas mishleisha samach l'daifen, and you place it less than 3 handbreadths away from the wall. And if it's less than 3 handbreadths away from the wall, you have the law of lovin. So you have 2.9 handbreadths of empty space, 2.9 handbreadths of empty space. Then you have a wall that is 4.1. So if you add 4.1 and 2.9, you get 7. What's 7? 7 is the size of the smallest wall, a sukkah, a wall that is of the sukkah. So if you have basically if you have a sukkah that's an L shape, then you could get away with 1 tefach handbreadth for the third wall. If you have a sukkah that's parallel to 2 walls that are parallel to each other, and you want to make a third wall in order to make a kosher sukkah, you need to make much more than a tefach. It needs to be 4.1 handbreadths within 3 handbreadths of the wall. So let's say 2.9 plus 4.1 equals 7, and then you have the size of a minimal wall for a sukkah. And that would be considered a kosher sukkah. So what comes out from this Gemara is, of course, we have Rav Yehuda's view that however you make your tefach third wall is kosher, but the other view, Rabbi Simon and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, which is the halacha, that what you need to do is you make a wall that's over 4 handbreadths. You need to have a board that's more than 4 handbreadths, and that will be placed within 3 handbreadths to one of the walls, and that will make the third wall of your sukkah a kosher sukkah, and it'll be basically the size. Ultimately, it'll cover the size of. It'll be considered as if you have a wall that's 7 handbreadths, because you're relying on the law of Loved, which makes it as if it's filled in. Okay. Now, the Gemara says, why over there where you have the L-shaped sukkah? It's enough to have a tefach, that you have a tefach that these same rabbis, Rabbi Simon and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, said a tefach soichek is good enough for the third wall. And here, the same 2 rabbis, Rabbi Simon or Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, are saying that you need 4.1 size board and put it with it. Why do you need so? It's enough. One tefach. Why over there was 1 tefach good enough? Here also, let 1 tefach be good enough. Why over there is it different that you said it's enough? A tefach that's a little more expanded. Why over here is different? The comment that you say, boy, pasar boy, you need 4 handbreadths and the little in the bit. 4 plus size board. So my answer is Hasam Dika Shtei Defanai Still Hasam. There you have two walls that are proper. So Sagi Lei B'Tefach Soichek. It's enough to have this third wall, an expanded tefach, meaning a little more than a tefach. But here the leka Shtei Defanais, you don't have two walls next to each other. Rather, it's open completely. If you have this board that's 4 handbreadths wide in a bit, and you put it in the right place within 3 handbreadths to the wall, one of the walls, it'll be kosher. Eloi. So now is this that the shlisha tafilu tefach the law of the halacha l'maishem Sinai that the third wall could be even a tefach is kosher, but the thing is, if you have a if you have a sukkah that is parallel walls, it needs to be visible as if it has a third wall. And so what it sounds like, the understanding here is that this is a rabbinic law. That's one of the understandings that it is. In other words, the halacha l'maishem Sinai is that it's good enough. You know, the way Rav Yehuda says, put your tefach, your third wall, it's kosher. Comes the rabbis and say, no, it doesn't look appropriate because as the Gemara just explained, it doesn't even look like two walls because they're not attached. So there you hear the rabbi said you need it to look much more similar to a sukkah. So the rabbis made a law that you need to have this, you need to follow this extra rules where you have 4 handbreadths plus a little, and you put it within. This way it looks like a wall and it'll kosher your sukkah. So it sounds like a rabbinic law added on to the halacha l'maishem Sinai, which originally would have been kosher. However, there is another opinion of the Pri Megadim that says that this is really even the daraisa, the rule from the Torah is that it won't be kosher unless you have this, which means that the law is that you need 3 walls, and the third wall normally is good to be a tefach, but that applies if you have them next to each other, or the meaning of it is that it has to seem to be surrounding, and the walls have to be connecting, and this would be the way to pull that off in order to make it that they're connecting and fulfill the halacha l'maishem Sinai, meaning that the halacha l'maishem Sinai seems to be not only that the third wall is a tefach, but that it sort of like surrounds. It's combined together. And in order to do that for 2 walls that are parallel, you need to do it this way. So there are 2 ways of learning this. If it's a part of the halacha l'maishem Sinai, or if it's just a rabbinic law. So now comes Rava. Amar Rava. Rava says, "Einoni teres ella be'tzuras hapesach." That when you have these two walls, and you have the tefach on the third wall, it is only permitted to rely on that if you have a tzuras hapesach, which would mean that you have a half a tefach on the one side of this frame, and a half a tefach a half a handbreadth on the other side of the frame, and then you have some type of a beam going on top of it, that would be considered a kosher sukkah. So Rava comes along and says, don't think it's so simple, this tefach third wall. You need to divide that handbreadth into two, and you need to make a tzuras HaPesach, which means a frame of a house, a form of a door. That's what you need, a frame of a doorway. So you need two poles with a beam on top, which don't have to be thick. They have to be 2 inches or whatever, maybe less, because it's a half of a tefach on one side, half of a tefach on the other side, and it would be kosher by doing it that way. Put some type of with something on top. Now, Ika Da'amri, some say, Amar Rava said, V'niteres nami b'tzuras HaPesach. This sukkah that only has 2 walls, it is also permitted with a tzuras HaPesach. This is the second way of learning Rava, that besides having a tefach, which would be within, 3, besides having a tefach the appropriate way that we said earlier, that it's within 3 handbreadths of the wall, and you put a tefach there, that would be kosher. But in addition to that, there's another alternative way. In other words, not in addition, I shouldn't say, an alternative way of koshering through making a third wall is the teres nami b'tzuras HaPesach. If you want to do the tzuras HaPesach option, you could do that, which would be to place a form of a doorway, and even if the poles are tiny, the sukkah will be kosher, because that will be considered a third wall. Now, Ika Dami, some say Rava comes in and says something altogether different. Amar Rava b'tzricha nami tzuras HaPesach. You also need a tzuras HaPesach, which would mean that you need to, in addition to having the tefach wall that's within 3 handbreadths of the L shape, but you would also need a tzuras HaPesach, that meaning for the rest of the wall, you would need to have a form of a doorway that would make this third wall to be considered into a wall. So it's majority open, but because you have beloved and you have tzuras HaPesach and you have a tefach of itself, all together, when you have everything, that would permit this third wall. Okay, so those are the 3 statements of Rava, and now we continue. Rav Ashi Ashkel Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi saw Rav Kahana.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, I think that the sukkah with the 2 parallel walls is going to be the only one that is going to actually be able to support the ska in every instance, because like the other ones, say like the 2 walls and the tefach. For example, when we lived in 555 Crown Street, we had a terrace where it had a balcony, where it had walls on either side, and then because of some kind of exhaust system or whatever, it even had the tefach sticking out from one of the walls, and that would have theoretically have been kosher walls for the sukkah, but there would have been no way to have suspended the stock from that. So of course we put up a prefab sukkah, and so like 2 of the walls were like double with the like the ones that were already there. But I'm just saying that even if you use 2 walls and a tefach, that if they're if they're perpendicular, then that's not going to necessarily be the minimum in order to support the schach.
So in other words, you're saying that the parallel sukkah is going to be easier to support the schach than the perpendicular sukkah. But the thing is, if you would put beams also, in a diagonal, make like your you could have like a diagonal board making like the hypotenuse of the triangle. So then that could support it would, you'd have to make sure that it's okay, but it could support maybe a mat or other stuff. See, it depends on the way. Also, the way in the olden days that they would use branches, and some of the branches could be very heavy on one side, so it could easily be held up by the L shape, and the other side would be would just be hanging, would just be a continuation of those branches. You could have like a. So I'm not convinced that in the olden days they couldn't figure out how to do it.
Okay.
It's a good point. You're right. It is easier. You're probably right. The parallel sukkah is going to be easier. Okay. Any other questions, or we should continue? Okay, let's continue. So we have here Ravashi. Ravashi Ashkechel Rav Kahana. He found Rav Kahana Ka'avid Tefach Seichik. He did this Tefach Seichik that he had a sukkah where you made the third wall out of this tefach. That's an expanded tefach, a little thicker than just the tefach, and within three handbreadths to the wall. And v'ka'avid tzuras haPesach, and he also made a tzuras haPesach, which was the final understanding of Rava's thing, that you'd also need a tzuras haPesach. Now, Amar Lei, to Rav Ashi, said to Rav Kahana, because Rav Ashi saw Rav Kahana made the sukkah, he said to him, Savar Mar Laha de Rava, Savar Rava Veniteris Nami Veniteris Pesach. Don't you know about Rava's statement? Which Rav Ashi understood that Rava had said that the second Rava, which was Viniteris Nami, that it's an alternative. You don't need to do both. You can use this, do it this way, or you can do it that way. So Viniteris Nami, Viniteris HaPesach. Don't you hold of that Rava said? So Amar Lei, Rav Kahana answered Rav Ashi, Ana Kiidach listen to Rav Svirali. I hold like the other text that Rava said, meaning I follow the opinion that Rava said a little differently. The Amar Rava utzricha nami tzuras haPesach, that Rava says you also need to have a tzuras haPesach, and I hold like that version. So in other words, there were three versions of Rava's statement. I hold like that version. That's okay. Now comes the next piece. And this was a very interesting and a little complicated also. How does a sukkah work with regard to sukkahs and regard to Shabbos? Is it considered a private domain? And so here we go. The Brisa says, the walls of the sukkah, shtayim kil chosin. You need 3 regular walls, like the norm. And the shayim kil chosin. Amar Rava v'chein l'Shabbos. And Rava says it also works for Shabbos. Wow. The third wall could be a tefach. Now, on every Shabbos, you really need 3 full walls. But on Sukkot, the third wall could be considered even a tefach would be considered a Rishus HaYachid. Now, what happens if you put the sukkah in the public domain right next to your house? You'll be able to carry from your house into the sukkah. What do you mean? My sukkah is not a Rishus HaYachid. It's not a private domain because it doesn't have 3 full walls. So the answer is, but since regarding Migo Dahavya Doifa Linyan Sukkah, since it's considered a wall regarding Sukkah, so Havya Doifa Linyan Shabbos, it's going to be considered a wall regarding Shabbos. And simple understanding would be that this is, according to biblical law, you fulfilled, the obligations of the biblical law that it's kosher. But excuse me. So regarding Shabbos, is rabbinic laws on top of this, I should mention, and you need something for the fourth wall to make it considered a proper fourth wall for the sukkah, for carrying for Shabbos. So that would be rabbinic. But the thing is, right? So anyway, the simple understanding of the Gemara is that if it works for Shabbos, it works for sukkahs, it works for Shabbos. This is kosher for sukkah. It's going to be kosher for Shabbos, and that's basically the understanding. It also works the other way. Something that's kosher for Shabbos will be kosher for sukkah, which we'll see. Okay, now comes the next thing. Abai asked a question on this statement of Rava. Do we really say this migo that if it works for sukkah, it's considered a wall for Shabbos? This is like a very unique law, but works for sukkah. It's halakha l'mashem for sukkah. Well, how do you go and say, it's going to be a private domain for laws of Shabbos? Seemingly it's a different thing. So the Gemara says, but do we say migo v'atanya? Didn't we learn at a brayso doifen sukkah to doifen Shabbos that the laws of the wall of a sukkah are similar to the walls of Shabbos, and whatever works regarding Shabbos works for a sukkah. And the example that we gave when we learned it was where you have poles that are only going in one direction. In other words, they're just going upward. They have vertical poles surrounding a whole box area. So what would be the law in that case? And between every pole is less than 3 handbreadths. So in other words, it's all considered loved. It's considered like you have a solid wall there, even though you don't. Now, the Gemara's case is that you don't even have any part of the wall that's vertical. It's all you don't have any part of the wall that's horizontal. It's all vertical. Just beams, just poles going upward, straight up, and there's no horizontal beams. So the law is that is considered kosher. Not only is it kosher, now this is a sukkah that has parutz meruba alo oimed, has majority open. Nevertheless, we say lavud. So in other words, it's majority ear space. Just have thin poles going around this box, making a box around the area, certain area. So that box in area has no, number one, it has no vertical wall. It has no horizontal wall. It's only vertical wall, and it also has majority open. Nevertheless, we say lavud and we attach it all, and it's considered kosher. They're considered a wall regarding Shabbos. It's going to be considered a wall regarding Sukkah. So, as long as they're within 3 handbreadths, so you can say the law of lavud. And another thing that it says is the Yasera Shabbos al Sukkah. So that works for Shabbos. It's going to work also for Sukkah. But there's something more strict to Shabbos over Sukkah. Shabbos ain't any teres ella ba'omen meruba laparetz. That on Shabbos it's not called a private domain only when you have the standing wall majority over the open wall. Now, again, that's different than the case that I just mentioned. The case I just mentioned, since it's within 8 inches or within 3 handbreadths, each of the poles, so that is considered loved. That's considered kosher. It's considered like a solid wall. What happens if you have bigger openings? So the law is that if you have too many big openings, then it could ruin the domain for Shabbos. So Shabbos is only permitted if you have majority solid. Again, it's different than the case that I gave with the poles that is majority open. That case, it's not called majority open. We see it as majority open in your physical eyes. But according to halacha, the law of Lavud says it's almost like a solid, considered like a solid wall. But however, if you had bigger openings, that would be a problem. That's what we're talking about here. We have bigger openings than the 3 handbreadths. So then you fall into a different category. It would ultimately be too much is open, and that would ruin your general laws of Shabbos to make it a kosher private domain. So it says Shabbos, you need to have more solid. Oimed merub al it's more solid than breached. Masha ein kain b'sukkah. However, sukkah is different, and sukkah would be kosher even if you would have majority breached. Why? Because we know that a sukkah could have 2.1. A sukkah would be kosher with a wall that's only 2 solid walls. The third wall is only a tefah. The thing is, even in those solid walls, you could have a door. If you have a doorway in that, it's already not majority. But we don't care if it's majority, because the laws of sukkah allow a sukkah to be a kosher sukkah, even if it's not majority solid. So the Gemara says, my lav Yisera Shabbos the sukkah, a sukkah. So what is this talking about? It must be meaning to say that the Shabbos of Sukkah, meaning the Shabbos during Sukkot, is more strict than the regular laws of Sukkah. That is, when it comes Shabbos, that my lav Yisera Shabbos to Sukkah, a Sukkah, that the laws of Shabbos are more strict than the laws of Sukkah. So even though for a kosher Sukkah, it would be good enough, even though majority is open. But regarding carrying on Shabbos, even the Shabbos during Sukkot, it's not going to work. You wouldn't be allowed to carry. And what would that mean? That we don't say this law of migu v'lo yamrina migu, meaning the Gemara before said, we say that if it works for Sukkah, it works for Shabbos. It works for Shabbos, it works for Sukkah. That's what the law of migu is. If it's considered a wall, it's considered a wall. Now comes along a brisa and says, no, that Yisera Shabbos al Sukkah, that the Shabbos has more stringencies than Sukkahs and than Sukkah. And the Shabbos of Sukkahs, you just simply won't be able to carry it. And sounds like we don't say migu. We don't say, if it works for this, it works for that. It's called the wall for Shabbos, called the wall for Sukkah, called the wall for Sukkah. We don't say that. So the Gemara answers, no, you read it wrong. The Gemara says, Loi, no, that's not the meaning. Yisera Shabbos the Alma, al Shabbos the Sukkah. That the Shabbos of Sukkah is actually permissible to carry in it, even if majority is open. What do you mean? Shabbos doesn't allow majority to be open. Yeah, but because it's Sukkot, and on Sukkot there's a law that we consider this 2.5 walls a kosher sukkah, which means that even if majority is open, because one of those 2 walls that are solid could have a doorway, that would mean that it's majority open. It's considered a kosher sukkah. And so if it's kosher regarding the laws of Sukkot, then it's going to be considered a private domain regarding the laws of Shabbos, even though normally on Shabbos we won't accept it. But on the Shabbos of Sukkot, it will be considered kosher. And that's the meaning of the Brisa, that Yisera Shabbos the Alma, Al Shabbos the Sukkah, the regular Shabbos, that's not Sukkah Shabbos. Those Shabbosim you can't carry in your nice pergola. But on the Shabbos of Sukkot, then you actually could carry there because it's a kosher Sukkah. The laws of Sukkah kick in, and we consider it a wall. The Gemara says, you say we're Sukkah the Alma, Sukkah the Shabbos. If so, let it say also the other case, that the Sukkah in general, the other days of Sukkah, Sukkah the Alma is more strict than the laws of Sukkah the Shabbos, than the laws of the Sukkahs that fall on when it falls on Shabbos, the Ilu Sukkah the Alma, because the regular day of Sukkahs, the other days of Sukkahs, Boy Tefach Seichel. You need the third wall to be a tefach, a handbreadth that's more expanded. The Ilu Sukkah the Shabbos, but the Shabbos on Sukkahs, or the day of Shabbos that's on Sukkah, the regular Sukkah day, you need a proper third wall that proper according to the rules that we mentioned, the Tefach Seichel. But on Shabbos there's a special law that a wall could be considered a lechi, just the beginning of a wall, meaning a pole could be considered a wall, and that's good enough for Shabbos for your third wall. So if you have a lechi, a little pole, which could be considered the beginning of a third wall, that would be good enough on Shabbos. And if it works for Shabbos, it'll work for Sukkot. Then why didn't the Brisa mention this? If you're telling me that that's the meaning, that we say the concept of migu, that since it works for one law, it works for the other law, so we should say it the other way as well. In other words, why did the Brisa only give one example of leniency? It could have given another example. So the Gemara says, let me just read the question, complete the question. Because you, Rava, are the one who says, you say that if you put schach on top of a mavui, on top of the two walls, that has a lechi for the third wall, it would be kosher. This would be kosher on the Shabbos of Sukkot. According to you, that should work because it's considered a wall regarding Shabbos. So let it be a wall regarding Sukkot. Let it be a wall regarding Sukkot as well, even though normally it wouldn't work. So the Gemara says, you know what? That we wouldn't need even to say in the Bryce. It's obvious that it's good. And if we say that a wall for Sukkot works for Shabbos, and that's a very lenient rule Sukkah has regarding Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos, to say that it'll be good enough for a Sukkah like Kolshkein, isn't that for sure? That for sure be good enough, and we don't have to say that in the Brisa. So that's basically the conclusion of this discussion, that the wall of one would work for the walls of the other. Of course, we have the next little piece talks about the case of Pasei Birois, which will also maybe touch on this idea. But the concept that we're saying here is the concept of migu, that if it works for one, it'll work for the other. And so some things that might be non-kosher during the rest of the year might be kosher in the laws of kosher on the Shabbos of Sukkot, or something that might be not kosher on the rest of the week of Sukkot might be kosher on the Shabbos of Sukkot. In other words, a Sukkah. So we have interesting laws here that are called the term that this falls under is called migu. That since it's kosher for one, it's going to be kosher for the other. We're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We'll see you.
Have a good day, all.
Thank you, Rabbi.